Let's go! We ready? Woo! Let's go, baby. Dummies for sports. Here we go. My favorite topic we get to discuss tonight, Yehuda. The running back position and the value or lack thereof of the running back position. And we've discussed this so many times, and you're probably like, Rocky, stop trying to beat a dead horse. But the truth is that I'm coming at it from a bit of a different angle now. So we've seen what's been happening over the last few days. And over the last few months and over the last couple of years, this has really been a development. Yeah. So there's been a couple examples that I want to point out and just discuss the running back position a little. And, you know, the disservice to a certain extent that's being done to them, but understandably from the organization's perspective. So, number one, Joe Mixon. The reason the Joe Mixon thing is weird, it's like now the Bengals restructure Joe Mixon's contract. They never restructure contracts. This is like a philosophy in Cincinnati. They never restructure contracts. They have yet to do it in years. And here they're restructuring Joe Mixon's contract. You obviously have Saquon Barkley getting franchise tag. You know, the second that the Cowboys had an opportunity to get rid of Zeke, they did just that. Dalvin Cook situation. So obviously there's a lot of examples of this just in the last year where we're seeing teams sort of take this approach of, well, you know, we're going to draft a running back. If after 4 years he's really that good, we're not going to sign him. Maybe we'll give him the franchise tag and we'll get another one in the draft. We'll take our chances with that. And it's understandable, Yehuda, like, you know, I've been outspoken saying that I think running backs are the most replaceable position in football. They're so dependent on their offensive line. You don't have a good O-line, your running back's pretty much useless. At the same time, you do need a running back. And, you know, the running backs... A lot of what I've been hearing on social media is, well, they put their bodies on the line, which they do, of course. We all know that the career for a running back is about 2.47 years, I believe is the exact number, 2.47 years. It's the shortest career span for a position in football, understandably. And you know, their lives probably don't last very long compared to other positions. So certainly they're putting their bodies on the line. But so yes, I feel bad for them. Like if we're coming from a individual perspective and they're getting paid such little money and they're sacrificing their bodies for it, yes. But at the same time, Yehuda, the NFL's organizations are correct as well in that yes, you feel bad for them, you sympathize for them, but that doesn't mean we should make bad business decisions. That's really all I'm coming from. So, you know, at what point, Yehuda, do you think, and you're gonna have a different perspective on this than me, and we could hash this out a little bit. At what point do you tell yourself, I feel bad for them. They do need a job, and we do need a running back, but we'll just take our chance in the draft and pay less.
Well, I mean, it is ironic because I'm going to agree with you a little bit here, and you're usually the guy who, you know, you just hate on running backs.
Oh, yeah.
But I do agree that, like, for the teams, like, what are they going to do? They have seen so much evidence of people literally falling off. And Todd Gurley, after he got paid, he was, he still scored a ton of touchdowns. But then the next year, that he has arthritis all of a sudden, and he just out of the league by 27 years old. You could just tell that the burst is gone. And David Johnson had serious issues with Le'Veon Bell after his whole contract situation. It didn't work out, and so the recent, I mean, it's a little bit of recency bias, but the recent developments that they've seen with these running backs who get massive contracts, Zeke, they just, their bodies are physically wearing down, and for a team, they say, why should we invest that extra $4, $5, $6 million, you know, to go from $8 to $15 million in a running back when we could put that into a nickel cornerback,
exactly,
a little bit more to a D lineman,
100%.
Like that. Those are what we would describe as "quote unquote" more valuable. Now, I prefer, as a fantasy football player, I would prefer to have bell cow running backs, and to have bell cow running backs, you need to pay them more because they're doing more work. They got to earn that.
Well, not anymore.
And
not anymore.
Well, I mean, you don't have to in the NFL, but just for fantasy, you know, it's good to see.
Okay, by the way, in fantasy, running back's value has also decreased over the years because now there's so many good receivers out there that it's like if you don't get a running back if you don't get two running backs in the first 2 rounds, you're pretty much just going receiver for a bunch of rounds and maybe quarterback if you can get Mahomes or Allen, which is also an interesting development. It used to be running back for the most valuable position in fantasy. Now,
No, that means that the way you just described it, that means that running backs are the most valuable because there are
if
so many good
if you get
receivers.
a good running back, then yes, technically that's valuable. But the amount of good running backs that are available are limited. That's the problem. So if you're looking at the overall
That,
options, overall scope of things, they're not as valuable because it's like, well, once I get past the top 5 or 6, why would I draft a running back?
that means that they are more valuable. That means a good running back is more valuable.
No, 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 no. Fine, yes, there are 5 running backs that are valuable, but outside of that, it's
Yeah.
not. So overall, it's like people are looking at running backs less in their drafts. That's, I guess, the point I'm trying to make here.
I would agree because you have these guys who are on another level, and like that's that's what in fantasy at least where you're like, if I get one of these 5 guys, I'm golden because I know that they give me such a leg up, just like some quarterbacks can do, like having Mahomes or Lamar when he was amazing, or Josh Allen when he was having one of his best years. You're like having, or Jalen Hurts this past year, having one of those running quarterbacks who, or someone who throws like that, for 100, 300 yards every game, 3 touchdowns. It just gives you such a higher leg up. So for fantasy football team to have these amazing running backs, it gives you such a higher leg up. But fantasy football is not real football, and does
It's
does
not.
having an amazing quarterback. Yeah, oh, I know,
Could have
right? A
fooled me.
new I know the way that some people respond and text these actual football players, these actual human beings about how they ruined their fantasy. You would think that fantasy football is their life, is the
The
real
amount of money that people invest into these things as well. You would think
exactly
that fantasy football is the real life football.
in the world. But to have but does a Christian McCaffrey, does a Derrick Henry, and having an otherworldly running back um, elevate your football team? I would say yes, if they are otherworldly. We saw Derrick Henry not single-handedly because football is the ultimate team sport, but Derrick Henry bulldozed his way for the Titans into the AFC Championship game for them, destroyed the Ravens' top 2 defense in 2019, ran over the Patriots, brought them to the NFC Championship game, or AFC Championship game. Christian McCaffrey just amazing dynamic playmaking ability for the Niners this past year. Like everyone went nuts with the thought of what Christian McCaffrey could do in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and like just that element that he added was just so incredible. So yes, I would say that these guys who are like top five running backs in the league, they deserve to be paid that much. But again, like we said, the teams are not going to be willing to shell it out unless they really, 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 really believe that you are on that level. And even a guy like Saquon, I think if you have one year where you're injured, or a quote major injury like an Achilles or an ACL or a knee or something, a soft tissue basically, that's going to cost you. Even if 4 out of 5 years you were amazing, to have one year that you tore your ACL, teams are not gonna shell out the Brinks truck for you. I mean, somehow Christian McCaffrey got away with it because he has a big contract and he had like a full year with the foot injury.
The way they
But
deploy him is very different than a standard running back as well.
exactly,
I was watching
yeah,
I was watching film on the Cowboys Niners game actually a couple days ago. I was assigned it, and the playoff game. And McCaffrey is a receiver, 10 times a game probably. I mean, he lines up at receiver. He even lines up on the outside, not just in the slot. Outside, the amount that they move around their receivers there is unbelievable. You have Kittle in the backfield multiple times a game. Literally, it's not as a fullback,
yeah.
as a halfback. You have Debo all over the place. You have Ayuk in that backfield sometimes. I mean, so the Niners are a bad proof. It's a very confusing.
They are not the rule.
Right. But listen, Kay, I've been on the record. I'm going to say it again. Running back is the least valuable position in football. The least valuable position in football. And I saw a graphic on Twitter that was going around that said kickers are getting paid on average about $500,000 more, maybe even more, than the running backs. And
That's crazy.
I don't think it's crazy. I agree with it. Kickers are more valuable than running backs. Why? Now, if you just use Justin Tucker as an example, well, obviously, Justin Tucker, great. He's had, over a dozen game-winning kicks in his career. He's the most accurate kicker in NFL history. But even like Chris Boswell's way more valuable than any running back in the NFL. Even like a second tier kicker, if you can get a kicker that's consistently good for 10 years, way more valuable than any running back in the NFL. Why? Running backs are replaceable. It's very simple. Like I said, they're the least valuable position in football. They're the most dependent on outside forces. Kickers are the least dependent on outside forces. They need blocking. They need a good snap. That's it. But if you're a good kicker, you'll do well in the NFL. If you're a good running back, good chance, a la Najee Harris, you probably just won't do much if you don't have a good offensive line. It's very simple. So I 100% agree that running backs are the least valuable position in football. However, I will say that when it comes to Christian McCaffrey, it's a little different. If you can utilize a running back's receiving ability, and he really has the ability to run legitimate routes, like an actual receiver, that's a whole different story, because you have an extra weapon coming out of the backfield that creates mismatches with the linebackers and with the slower safeties and so on and so forth. So I certainly agree with that. And Derrick Henry, maybe for a year or two, is the exception, just because he was tallying so many yards after contact at a rate we have never seen it ever. And yards after contact can be directly attributed to the running back generally. So if you have a guy that's averaging that many yards after contact, like Derrick Henry was, then he had some value. Granted, enough to warrant a double-digit per year contract? No, because again, he's still taking a lot of hits. He's not going to last very long, and he's still not that valuable. So overall, least valuable position in football. I hold with that, but I sympathize with them because they put their bodies on the line, and they're not getting paid a lot. They don't deserve to get paid a lot, not because they're not good, but because of the nature of their position. But they do have to get paid somewhere, and they are playing in the NFL, so I sympathize with them, but I also understand where the organizations are coming from. That's really the twist I was trying to make on this.
Yeah. Do you think Saquon and Tony Pollard can run legitimate routes?
I don't think Saquon can. Pollard, maybe. I'll have to look into that a little more. McCaffrey can. Just telling you from...
Yeah, I think Pollard can. I mean, McCaffrey, we know, but I think Pollard can. I would agree with you. Saquon can run around here or there, but he is too bulky to be like a receiving back. Like he obviously can catch passes out of the backfield, but Tony Pollard is just so athletic, and you really could line him up everywhere.
That's meaning if you have a guy. If you have a guy that adds receiving value to that extent, like McCaffrey or maybe even Pollard, let's say, then he's valuable because he's a good receiver, not because he's a good running back. It's a whole different story. Now, you have a guy like Deebo Samuel, for example, who I would say is valuable mainly because he's a great receiver, but the fact that he can run is more valuable than the average running back being able to run. Because all of a sudden, he's in the backfield. Is he going to go run a route? He's an actual receiver. You actually have to dedicate a cornerback. He's a top 10 receiver in football, in my opinion. Like as a pure wide receiver, I think he's a top 10 receiver in football. This guy can run legitimate routes to the sidelines, middle of the field. He can run in routes, out routes. He can, literally run a go route straight, and be a guy over the top. That's how much quick speed he has. There's really no route that he can't run. He's a legitimate number one wide receiver. And now he's lining up in the backfield. How the heck do we account for that? We still have Ayuk and Kittle. We have to dedicate quarterbacks to them. So that creates incredible mismatches. I would agree with that. But just a running back running, I don't think there's much value there in terms of individual players.
Well, now that we know the perspective of the humans, let's see the perspective of the computers. I could just share with you a quick snippet of what ChatGPT had said, and they said,
so what was
can you win the NFL without a good running back? And so it says, while having a talented running back can certainly be advantageous, it is possible to win games without relying heavily on the running game or having a superstar running back. So ChatGPT ultimately says, while having a good running back can be beneficial, it is not the sole determining factor in running games in the NFL. A well-coached team with a solid passing game, versatile backfield, and a strong defense can overcome the absence of a superstar running back and still find success in the league. So ChatGPT is not, it kind of sounds like us and not really favoring the running back.
Wait.
So I asked straight up. So I said, so when you pay Saquon, and it's like, I'm just an AI language model.
Then all of a sudden they get, okay, so now you have to follow it up. Ask it, do you need a quarterback to win in the NFL? Just to test, test the waters a little bit. Ask it that because, great. Maybe it just gave you a generic answer. I mean, ChatGPT generally is pretty good. They give detailed and thorough answers that are generally pretty accurate most of the time. But now I'm curious what it would respond to. Do you need a quarterback to win in the NFL? Test it twice.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, it says it is having good quarterback is generally considered crucial for
Ah,
success. Yeah.
there you go.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, it's
There.
unfortunate for the running backs, but even the computers are saying that their position is very undervalued.
There you go. I want to say one last thing on this. I think, as biased as I am toward PFF, I think PFF was the spearheading force in this movement toward not paying running backs. PFF years ago, already 10 years ago, was already saying, there's really no reason to be overpaying running backs. They're really very replaceable. They're very dependent on outside forces. Their careers don't last very long. Teams are really overpaying them. It took teams like 5 or 6 years, but eventually teams started to catch on. The Le'Veon Bell thing was sort of the nail in the coffin. Since then, you haven't seen too many big contracts. So, I do think PFF really spearheaded this, and now it's conventional wisdom. I think they talk about it on ESPN and NFL Network now. So, PFF, I'm just saying, is ahead of the grain by a few years. And in a few years, whatever they're talking about now, it'll be incorporated into mainstream media. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I just found an article from 2013 from Bleacher Report titled "Why Selecting Running Back in First Round is Never a Good Idea."
Oh, look at that. Bleacher Report also had it.
Yeah, PFF definitely ahead of the curve, and they know what they're talking about. But some here and there, it's popping up in sports media that it's not a good idea to draft running backs. And now, unfortunately, those guys are really taking the hit. We didn't even talk about like Dalvin Cook got cut.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Dalvin Cook's considered a top 5 running back in football, and they still cut him. They don't even. The thing is, even if you're paying a running back $5-6 million, it might not be worth it. Because you can put that, $5 or $6 million. That's half of a top-notch pass rusher. That's half of the contract of a top-notch pass rusher in today's NFL, and that's far more valuable than a running back. I think that's really the direction teams are going in. That's a great example.
Very unfortunate because it really is. It's such an important position. It's such a fun position. Like their underrated ness, I would say, about running backs is their ability to read protections and pick up blitzing linebackers and stuff. And sometimes that even will lead to the more of the injuries than the just getting tackled and getting beat up. Because
blocking is an underrated part of it. That's true.
Yeah, that's them literally jumping up in front of a linebacker or a D lineman who's running full speed at the quarterback, and they have to drop at him and just get blown up to add that extra 1 second, extra split second, so that the quarterback can deliver the ball. So that's a very thankless part of the job, but that can be sometimes why some coaches will favor one guy over the other because they can read the protections.
The thing is about the blocking, while it's very important, obviously, most running backs are generally pretty average at doing that. You don't have a big discrepancy between which running backs are great blockers and which running backs are just way worse. So, paying a guy $5-6 million just because he's slightly better blocker than the other running back. So, that's the problem. And really, their production, yes, running back highlights, go watch some Barry Sanders highlights, I mean, it's magical. It's, one of my favorite plays in NFL history is the Marcus Allen, reversing fields against the Redskins in the Super Bowl. That is just, that's a highlight for the ages. So running backs are such a fun position to watch, but they're just, and one could argue that, back in those days, running backs were far more valuable. But in today's NFL, it's just the direction the league is moving in. And you need to be competent. You need to understand how to read blocks. You need to understand how to exploit holes, exploit voids in the defense. Those are not advanced skills. Any professional running back can do that. But eventually, you're going to get to a point where, okay, we still need to have an NFL caliber running back. We could just have college caliber running backs running around there. So maybe they'll start to get paid a little more at some point here. But who wants to be a running back at this point? Like, from an individual perspective, why would you want to put your body on the line just to get paid, a couple $1 million a year? I mean, a couple $1 million is a lot of money for us standard folk. Yeah. But for an NFL player, if you have that athletic ability and you could be maybe a tight end or a wide receiver, I would think, unless that's your only entry into the NFL as a running back. But other than that, then it's tough. It's gonna be interesting to see what direction this moves in. But anyway, that'll wrap up our conversation about running backs. This will probably not be the last time we talk about running backs. It's interesting. They've come up a lot recently. A lot of people have been catching on to this, and we'll see what the conversation around running backs how that goes. So. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Sorry, I was just trying to shove away a bug. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And my headphones went off in the process. And I haven't reminded you guys in a while to subscribe. Please subscribe. YouTube, preferred platform, that's Spotify, Apple, wherever. Like the podcast on the bottom, thumbs up. Like the episode, you give it a heart. give a comment, interact, reach out to us. Please, that's what we love about this. I was just telling you before the podcast. My favorite part about the podcast is when people interact and we get to really start some real great conversations about the topics that we discuss during the podcast. So please reach out to us.
I said a good schmooze.
Good schmooze. Always want to pop a good schmooze. Take care, guys. We'll see you later.